Hi everybody, welcome back. So this thing's so huge I have to move the camera about as far as the camera stand can go just to get it all in frame. But what we're going to do in this part is I'm going to work on the chassis here for the power supply, and then I'm going to get ready to do these boards down here in the corner. The power supply board and the protect board and all that, I bought a set of aftermarket boards that are modern, that use modern components, and they're much improved over this, and they're going to really improve the reliability of this amp without really changing any of the characteristics of how it functions or sounds. So that'll be in a later part. In this one, I just want to get these capacitors removed. I want to clean the chassis, just wipe it down, and then get the new caps put in place and get them ready. And then that'll be this part, and then the next one we'll be working on these boards down here. Alright, let's get this thing apart. First of all, we have to remove a couple more wires here, and I'm probably just going to snip these rather than unwire wrapping them. And as I always say, you want to take copious quantities of photographs when you do this, so you know how everything's going to go back in. I mean, not that that's ever happened to me. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to get my favorite screwdriver that my grandson got for me for Christmas. And I'm going to take these ground straps off, and then we have to desolder them off of the terminals. And then I'll get this side off the same way. Okay. And this side here is just going to be I don't know what this is all about. Kind of weird. Chunk of wire wrapped on there, but it's like that on both sides, so it must be factory. I don't know. Okay, let's get these screws out of here. There's one. And I don't know if you noticed or not, but I marked the plus and minus terminals underneath the chassis, so it'll make it easier to orient these new caps when we get them put in. Now the ones I chose for this are just the standard ones that everybody uses on these. I don't know if they're, what are they? Nippon Chemicons, I think. They're very good caps, but I would have preferred, there's a TDK capacitor that has a much longer life. I mean, these ones here, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 hours, which is good for these, But the TDKs are, I think they have a higher temperature coefficient, and in addition, they're like a 12,000 hour capacitor. So just all around longer life. I mean, things like this, these receivers, there's not that many of them left that are in really good condition. And, I'd love to be able to have people be able to hear this thing 30 or 40 years from now and experience what these things were like. I just think it would be cool to do. All right, so you can see from the metal underneath here what it should look like, and then you can see what it does look like. And just a lot of crud. So we're going to need to clean that. And let me get things set up for that. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is just kind of loosen up this surface dust, because it's kind of stuck on there a little bit. I'm just using this stiff nylon brush. Kind of break this up a little bit if I can. And I'm not going to paint this thing or anything like that. I'm not going to go crazy with it, because you really aren't going to see this real clearly from the outside once it's all put back together. But I do want to kind of clean it up so it doesn't corrode or rust or whatever. Okay, so once I get the surface stuff kind of broken up, I'll take the vacuum and I'll spare you the noise of the vacuum cleaner, and I'll just vacuum some of this dust off. Okay, so first thing I did was I just vacuumed that dust off. Then I just took a little bit of this Barkeeper's Friend and kind of a damp rag and wiped this down really well with that and kind of polished it, and then cleaned that off with just a water-soaked damp rag to get the chemical off, and then just took just a paper towel with just sprayed some WD-40 on it and just put a very thin coating of that on there just to treat the metal just a little bit. Now, if I had some Picklix 20 treatment, I would put that on there, because that's really good stuff, but I don't have any. But this will work very well, and it should make it last a long time. We're going to keep this in a good environment. We're not going to let it sit in a garage or a basement or anything after this. So now we're ready to install the new capacitors. Let me get my gloves off here. And these are the new caps that I'm going to use. They're very common. This is pretty much the ones that everybody seems to use on these. They're very good quality. Nothing special though. And these are 22,000 microfarads as opposed to the 15,000s that were in there. That's really not going to make much of a difference. Some people will go back on the sound stage and opening, widening, the whatever, but really it's not going to make a difference. The biggest deal is the capacitor is exactly the same size. It's a wee little bit taller, but it will fit in there, you can see. And that's the big thing, and it's should last a nice, very long time. Okay, these are painted screws, and I just take a rag with some window cleaner sprayed on them, like Windex or something. They polish right up. Now these aren't going to get tightened down until I get the capacitors where I want them, because they have to flex a little bit until the caps are clamped down there properly. But we will get the screws all started to get everything in position. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the caps in here, flip it over, and get them situated so they're lined up properly. I'm going to do this with all four before I even install the capacitors. And once I do that, I'll be right back. Just like this. And if you notice, I oriented these clamps so that once I get them where I want them, I can just reach in and tighten them. If you rotate this so that they're facing this way, it's really hard to get a screwdriver in there. So do that and it'll make it easier for you. Okay, I have them just in here loosely so I can move them around. Now I'm going to flip this thing up, and I can take my cleaner, Kleenex stuff here out of here. Take that out. And what we want to do is, since I marked all these, it should be pretty easy to line them back up. So you can see there's the positive there and the negative there. So I want the plus. I don't know if you could see this around the camera. I want the plus on this side, which means I want the minus on this side. So it's just going to be like that. I'm sorry, I'll flip it this way. So we're going to have the dot facing up. And then what I'm going to do is, you can see a little bit of that barkeeper's friend got on the back here. So I'm going to clean that off, and I'll be right back. Okay, so to get these grounds to look as original as possible, I've taken a couple of these little ring terminals. I take the you just take the insulation off, cut it off, and then unwind the barrel and flatten it. You can see I just flattened it by just squishing it with the pliers. And when it's done, it kind of looks like this. And then I just bent this up and clamped it in there. And then when you put this in here like this, that should give us a good surface to attach that. And it should look a lot neater than just, you know, putting a couple of ring terminals with a wire jumper across there. You can use the original hardware then, and it'll look kind of original. And then I just want to attach, we're going to take some bus wire and wind it around there, and we'll solder it on there perfectly, and we will have a really solid ground. This is some nice 20 gauge tinned copper bus wire. Good quality stuff. Oh, did you see that? That cap was completely discharged the other day. And that is what we call dielectric absorption. So let's take a look at these caps and see what's happened here. I bet you that was only about 1 or 2 volts. But if I go from, yes, Tony jumped because he didn't expect that. If I go from here to here, 0.2 of a volt there. And if I check this one, look at that, 5 volts. There's almost 5 volts. At 22,000 microfarads, that's a lot of current. And that's what you saw. So let me get my discharger, and I'm just gonna get rid of that on there so I don't jump again. That was cool. And the funny thing is, I checked these when I got them. I always check these big capacitors when they come in, and because of that, that's called dielectric absorption. And electrolytic capacitors, especially the big ones like this, can have that. And I don't know if you remember the LC102, the Sencor, LCR meter. It actually can test dielectric absorption. It's one of the few pieces of test equipment that will. And it's a chemical reaction that causes, like an electrochemical reaction that causes the capacitor to charge up without you actually having to attach any power source to it. It's a chemical thing. And that's why a lot of the great big capacitors, when you get them, they'll ship with a shorting wire across them, and that's why. And these probably should have that on them. They won't charge up really high. I mean, they'll usually, like this is a 100 volt cap, and if you notice, it charged up to about 5 volts, 4 volts. That's pretty high, but it won't hurt you, but it can hurt things that you touch on it, metal things, because of course, when you discharge 22,000 microfarads at 5 volts into something, that's a lot of current into a dead short. So you can mess up your screwdriver or something. So anyway, now if I let this sit long enough, like overnight, it'll be back up to a couple of volts by tomorrow morning. Like even now, you saw I discharged it with my discharging wand, but if we measure it again now, just from the couple minutes we've been talking, you can see it's still 1/4 of a volt. And see it climbing? See how it's going up? That's called dielectric absorption. You guys just like to see me jump, though. Admit it. You had fun with that. I'll leave that in the video. I'm not proud. That's an act of humility. That's a good thing. So, let's get the thick solder. That ain't going nowhere. Okay. And that looks a lot better than that other way they had it. So this is good. Alright. So now we can put these terminals in here, and those are going to be the ones that are going to hold all the wires for the, like these here. And I will rearrange all that and make those nice, and then we'll be good. Well, I have the amplifier modules reinstalled and the heat sinks, and I have a piece of really soft rug on the bench. You can't see it, but you can see the end of it there. And I am not taking any chances with scratching these because they're just so nice. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to reattach the power wires to the capacitors. And in order to do that, I'm going to use ring terminals, and I am going to use these nylon heat tubing, whatever you call it, just to give it a little extra protection when this goes in there. And just we'll do one side and I'll kind of show you what I did, and we'll go over it. Alright, so I am not going to fall for this a second time. I am going to check what's on this capacitor because it's been a couple days. So that one's nothing. Look, that's 32 millivolts. That's good. How about this one? That one's got back up to 1.15 volts, so I'll discharge that one. Get my little dischargey box here and make sure. Let's give it a second. Let's see what we got now. That's crazy how much this builds up power. There we go, 200 millivolts. That's good. That won't melt anything. All right. Continuing on. You can see how I did these. I put some of this heat-proof, cut-proof stuff in there because this is going to go in here. I don't want anything to rub through. And put some heat shrink on that where they couple together. So we'll see when it's done. Okay, so there's our first one, which I think is a lot neater than a lot of the ones I've seen out there. So hopefully this one will hold up and work well. Now let's do this one. Okay, there it is. So we got all the capacitors wired up and ready to go. Now I'm not going to put the big transformer in because it's just in the way and it adds a lot of weight and bulk to moving this thing around, because on our next video what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace these two boards, the protect board and the power supply board. I have the new ones, and of course they're going to have to be built, but when they're done they'll be drop-in replacements. So those are going to go in like that, and hopefully that'll go without a hitch. One thing I like about these is the rectifiers that are on here are upgraded from the originals. They're much better. All of the components are better quality, longer lasting, everything than the originals. So even if you rebuilt these original boards, I don't think they would ever be as good as these. That being said, I'm going to have a good spare set of original boards because I'm not going to change anything on them. Anyway, that'll be the next video. Until then, peace, joy, happiness, and good health in your lives, and we'll see you all again real soon. And there's the top side.